Now, Executive Suite with WPRI.com reporter Ted Nesi.
A few years ago, Nick Garrison had a dream to leave the corporate rat race and start a brewery. Today, that dream is a reality. Garrison's Foolproof Brewing has become a bona fide success, selling its Pawtucket-made craft beers across southern New England and planning for continued growth going forward. This week on the first half of Executive Suite, Foolproof Brewing Company President Nick Garrison. Then, the taxpayer-backed Slater Technology Fund has placed a $350,000 bet on a tech startup founded by a GE Capital alum. It's called Absolute Commerce, and it wants to shake up how companies manage billions in purchases from their suppliers. On the second half of Executive Suite, the CEO of Absolute Commerce, Kevin Wilbur. Welcome to Executive Suite. I'm Ted Nesi. As you heard there, Kevin Wilbur will be with us later in the show to talk about his new tech startup. But right now, I'm very pleased to welcome back to Executive Suite Nick Garrison of Foolproof Brewing. Nick, thanks for being here.
It's great to be back, Ted. Thanks for the invite.
So I was talking to folks and said, last time I had Nick on was November 2012. You were just getting going. You hadn't actually brewed any beer yet. And you were talking about sort of what it was like to get started. Now, as people can see on the table, the beers are out. They're selling. Tell me, when did you brew the first beer and how have sales been so far?
So our first batch was actually not long after you and I sat down. It was December 7th, 2012 was our official anniversary. That was when we brewed our first batch of Backyard IPA. And it's been a whirlwind journey since that day, and it's going quite well. We're now obviously in Rhode Island, but you can also find our beers in Massachusetts and Connecticut. We've expanded our portfolio, we've expanded our team, and it seems like overall people have really embraced the Foolproof brand here and around New England.
Now, has it met your expectations? I know you talked about you tried to be very methodical, did a lot of research before you weren't just on a whim one day, I'm opening a brewery. And so I'm sure you had forecasts, you had ideas of how it would go. Has it met what you hoped for?
Yes and no. You hear that old expression, planning is instrumental, but plans are worthless or whatever. Everything kind of goes out the window once the reality sets in. But no, overall, very happy, definitely meeting expectations, but we're, of course, always thinking, what's next? What can we be doing better? How can we be selling more beer?
And fairly quickly, you doubled the brewing capacity last year in 2013. Give us a sense of the scale of your operation up there in Pawtucket. How much you have the capacity to brew right now with all the machinery you've put in?
Sure. So we have what's called a 30 barrel brew house. What that means is essentially when we brew a batch of beer, it's roughly 1,000 gallons. And when we opened, we had X amount of capacity. And I always joke with people, we quickly realized that Rhode Islanders drink a lot of beer, and so we had to actually double that capacity after 3 months of operation. So now with the current tank setup we have we can brew about 4,500 barrels in a year. And one thing that's nice about our facility, we can bring in new tanks and expand without necessarily having to increase the real estate footprint that we have.
Now, one of the first times after that interview, I realized this seemed to be going pretty well for you was when I was at McCoy Stadium seeing a Pawsox game, and they were selling Foolproof beer there. It was on draft, I believe. Tell me about, was it difficult as a new, there is a lot of beers out there. Was it difficult to sort of convince, different establishment, whether it's bars or the stadium or somewhere else, try us out, give us some of your coveted, real estate on your taps or wherever. Like, what was that like to go out there and get the beer in people's hands?
And that remains one of the biggest challenges of running a brewery. Fortunately, we have just some terrific wholesale partners. CNC Distributors carries us here in Rhode Island, and I think they did and continue to do a fantastic job getting our beer out in the local market. They always say in this industry, the first time you sell a beer, it's easy. It's the second time that's the real challenge. So now that we're in our second year, the honeymoon's over, and we're seeing our numbers continue to grow. That's really promising, and to be getting into accounts like McCoy Stadium, particularly in our hometown of Pawtucket, that's really special for me and my team to see.
How much, where do you find that the sales are really happening? Is it a lot of people getting it in a bar? Is a lot of people going to a liquor store and buying the cans? Is it mixed all over? Do you get a sense of that?
Yeah, it's a blend of the two. Roughly, we do about 65% of our sales in liquor stores, the remaining 35% or so in bars and restaurants.
So tell people about how many beers are you selling these days? How many? We have different colors right here, so we know there's a whole bunch. Walk us through the inventory.
Absolutely, yeah. So we've grown our portfolio to 6 beers. I have 5 in front of me now.
Drink one on the way? I hope not.
We do have we've got a new beer actually coming out in a month. I'll talk about that soon. But our lightest beer there on my right is the Golden Ale in the red can. That's our maybe our most approachable beer for folks that don't drink a lot of craft styles. Barstool, it's called. Sells very well. The green can's our bestseller, Backyard IPA. It's about 40% of our sales. IPAs are very popular, particularly among craft beer fans. We've got a great dark beer too, called Porter. It's called Rain Cloud. Sorry, it's in the dark blue can, and then in the light blue can we have one of our newer beers. It's actually been very, very popular. It's a Farmhouse Ale Belgian style.
I actually got a question about that
Sure.
one on Twitter. People like that one apparently. Yeah.
It's been selling very well. It's called La Ferme Urbaine. We call it LFU for short, French for the urban farm, and it's sort of our post-work day beer. And then actually an even newer beer in the yellow can is our double IPA, which is King of the Yard. It's sort of the royal big brother of the backyard. And we do have a Russian Imperial Stout that's not in stock right now because it's more of a winter beer. And of course, I mentioned a new beer coming out called Ogtoberfest, not to be confused with Oktoberfest, which will be out next month on August 9th at a festival that we are hosting at the brewery.
And when we talked last time, you said your approach was going to be trying to make the beers tied to moments in people's lives, right?
That's right.
That.
Yeah, we look at beer as more than just an alcoholic beverage. It's really is an experience. Drinking a beer, it's something that hopefully is done responsibly. It brings friends and family together, and who hasn't had a great time over a beer. So we really try to capture that concept with our brand and how the naming conventions we apply to the beers and the symbolism you see on each can. So when we brew, we actually think about these specific activities in life and basically ask the question, if I was doing activity X, for example, hanging out inside on a rainy day or flipping burgers in my backyard, what would be just the perfect beer to have in that moment? And I think that's a concept that's really resonated with people and is part of the reason the brand's been so successful.
How do you actually decide what to brew? Obviously you had the first ones ready to go as you started up, but then since then you've added more. Walk me through the process to decide, all right, we have a concept maybe, do you testing it? How does that work?
Well, I'll be honest, we don't really do a whole lot of formal testing. I mean, we sort of start by looking at our current portfolio, what we're brewing, what we're not brewing, maybe if there are holes to fill. We also have dialogue with our wholesalers, retailers, kind of see what the demand might be, what style of beer might sell well, and also we like to brew beers that we love. So we're not always 100% sure if it's going to sell great, but so far I think every beer we put out.
How long's the process from those discussions through whatever you put in there and you try different hops and whatnot to getting something you can drink?
The actual experimentation with the brewing, there's not a lot of it. And that's a testament, I think, to the talent of our brewmaster and our brewing staff is that confidence and the talent they have and experience with brewing beer, that we can craft a recipe and put it together and have a high degree of confidence that the beer is going to turn out well, and that's worked out well for us. But it's usually probably a period of 2 to 3 months from deciding that, okay, we're going to make a new beer. What is it? What's it going to taste like? What's the brand? What's the name? What's the message we're going to try to deliver with this beer?
All right, we're going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to talk more with Nick Garrison about the growth of Foolproof Brewing in Pawtucket, and stay tuned later for a new startup, Absolute Commerce, a tech startup here in Rhode Island. Stay tuned to Executive Suite. Welcome back to Executive Suite. I'm Ted Nesi. Later on in the show, we're going to talk to Kevin Wilbur, a General Electric alum who now has a tech startup in Rhode Island called Absolute Commerce, shaking up how companies work with their suppliers and make their purchases. But right now, very pleased to be joined by Nick Garrison. He's founder and president of Foolproof Brewing in Pawtucket. You see some of his products here on the table with us today. So, Nick, one thing people will notice is that you are in cans, not bottles. Yes. Why that choice? Why cans? I thought cans were sort of déclassé in the beer world. Why cans?
Well, cans are one of the fastest growing packaging segments in beer, and this surprises people when they hear it, but cans are actually very good for beer, primarily because they block out sunlight, and sunlight's very bad for beer. Cans also have a small amount of headspace in them, which is good because that means there's actually less oxygen in the can, and oxygen degrades the quality, the shelf life of beer over time. So cans are great. Another reason we decided to put our beer into cans is I was talking earlier about our whole idea of pairing the beers with experience as well. Cans are really conducive to having a quote-unquote beer experience, so people can fill up a backpack and go to the beach, or go golfing or a concert or wherever. You can take cans places that you can't take bottles. They don't break, they're lighter, take up less space. So there's a lot of benefits to cans, and it's really, I think, where the industry's headed.
Interesting. Now, do you do tours up at Foolproof? Can people come see the process?
We do, yeah. We open our doors to the public on Friday evenings from 5 to 7. We do tastings, which is something we started doing just a couple months ago. And then we also do a more in-depth brewery tour on Saturdays from 1 to 5. We do 4 tours. They start on the hour, and it's a great time. It's a great deal. People come out, they get a glass, get to learn a little bit more about the company, the brewing process, and of course drink some beer.
Now, which is always nice. Can they show up at the door? Do people have to buy tickets in advance?
No, they show up. You can book in advance if you'd like to, but most folks just show up.
Now, you have other products, which is kind of interesting to me, including soap. You
Yes.
have beer soap. Tell me about beer soap.
Well, I tell people if this beer thing doesn't work out, I'm going to sell soap for a living. The beer soap is our top-selling merchandise item. It's actually a great guy who's down in Newport. He runs a company called Spindrift Soap Company, Colby Fields, and he actually works with a number of the other breweries in the state too. And he takes our beer and he makes soap out of it. And it's really good soap.
Really?
And very popular, particularly around the holidays.
Sure.
And so if you
Do you
want
end
to
up
come in and get
smelling
some
like
soap.
beer, though, from like washing yourself?
It doesn't really smell like beer. It has some other local ingredients in it, but beer is just, I guess, part of the base used to make the soap, and it's great. I use it at home. So.
You also have T-shirts. I've seen people out and about with the Foolproof T-shirts on. How important is other merchandise to your business and your business plan for the place beyond just the beers themselves?
Yeah, we're a small company. We don't have a huge advertising budget. There's a reason you don't see Foolproof billboards and television commercials, but merchandise are a great way for us. Not only to connect with our customers, but then they go out and they're showing their support and their pride of Foolproof, and those shirts in particular are super comfortable. So we sell a lot of those, and it's great just seeing people out there, wearing the brand and supporting us.
I'm sure my colleagues at Channel 12 will sell you those TV commercials anytime you want to buy them. I'll put that pitch in for
One
them.
day.
Yeah. So Foolproof, of course, not the only brewery that's opened in Rhode Island in recent years. There were some already, even before the boom lately. Do you see brewing as a growth industry for the state more broadly, both your own company's success, but beyond that as well? Do you see real opportunity there?
Absolutely. I mean, I think for a while, and before what I like to call the mini renaissance that's happened in Rhode Island beer, as a whole, Rhode Island didn't have a lot of breweries. We actually had one of the lowest number of breweries per capita in the country, and so that's really changed in just the last 2 years, which is fantastic. And I think there is certainly a lot of growth opportunity for the segment. At the same time, it also means increased competition, which I think benefits everyone, because it means everyone's going to be getting better beer, hopefully. It really raises the stakes of everything. So.
The competition is an interesting question. I was talking recently to Chris O'Leary. He's a Rhode Island native, now lives in New York, and edits the beer website Brew York, New York, which I love the name there. He mentioned to me there are now nearly 3,000 breweries in the United States. How much do you ever worry about saturation or that level of competition? Does it make it harder for Foolproof to break in compared with, say, Sam Adams a couple decades ago when there weren't as many non-Bud Light type beers?
Sure. I mean, we're definitely seeing the highest number of breweries in the country since before Prohibition, so it's a remarkable figure. There's no doubt about it. The competition is extremely high, but I'm very confident and optimistic about our future. In terms of what the saturation point is, it's hard to know. It's hard to know if there's an exact number where the market simply won't be able to support that number of breweries anymore, because there's only so many tap handles, so much space in the liquor stores. But what I think what we're finding is the breweries that are making great beer, that have a story to tell with their brand, that have that distribution footprint. There's so much opportunity there. So again, I feel very confident and optimistic about where we're headed. And
there is some camaraderie among the different beer makers here in Rhode Island, including, I think, some events coming up, you were saying. Tell me about those.
Yeah, I think I've said this during the first interview, it's just such a great industry to work in because of that sense of camaraderie and friendship. And, yes, breweries are competitors in the sense that we're all making beer and operating in the same market. But just last night, the Brewers of Rhode Island got together, the Rhode Island Brewers Guild. We do this once a month, and we actually had Congressman Langerman come down and visit us at Grace Hill Brewing, Rhode Island, down in Westerly, and so it was great to get his ear and listen to some of his thoughts and comments about brewing in Rhode Island and listening to the challenges that we face as brewers. But in terms of the festival, it seems like there's a new beer festival every week. It's insane. I mean, my summer is pretty much booked solid already. But I think the one you're referring to is the craft brew races in Providence that are happening on Sunday, July 20th. And we're actually going to have a running team. It's a 5K race combined with a beer festival. Apparently there's a intimate connection between running really hard and then drinking beer afterwards. So.
Or drinking beer beforehand, then you got to take a run.
That makes it considerably harder.
Exactly. All right, that's all the time we have for this segment. Nick, thank you so much for being back. We'll check in with you again, and thank you guys for watching. Stay tuned, because coming up next, Kevin Wilbur will be here talking about his startup, Absolute Commerce. Stick with us on Executive Suite. Welcome back to Executive Suite. I'm Ted Nisi, and this beer has nothing to do with my guest. This is leftover from Nick Garrison before, who's watching in the studio here with us. My guest now is Kevin Wilbur, whose tech startup Absolute Commerce, as I mentioned, has received a $350,000 investment in multiple increments from the Slater Technology Fund, and it's an interesting thing, and we want to break it down for you to understand what he's doing here. So, Kevin, let's give people your basic explanation. What do you do at Absolute Commerce?
So we are kind of equal parts software company and data management company, and we manage electronic catalogs of products, really in a business-to-business context, but it allows our customers to transact with their suppliers in an electronic fashion. So the best analogy that I can make is really for a consumer experience. Really, if you think about e-commerce websites, be it Amazon, BestBuy.com, something like that, there's really two elements of the experience you have when you go there. The first is the e-commerce platform itself. So there's a search engine, there's a shopping cart, you can check out, that kind of very common paradigm through there. The second part of your experience is really about the products and the information that you see there. That's the part that we manage for people, and it really starts with the ability for a search engine to find the products that are there based on what you're searching on, making sure that it's relevant and the results come back, but it's also being able to give that human person who's reviewing those items the ability to differentiate between them, understand what they're looking at and what they're buying. So we do that really in a broad, kind of large-scale business-to-business context, but it's really, it's that same concept. Most of the large organizations that we work with have similar purchasing systems in place that have that same kind of e-commerce paradigm. What we're really doing is being able to bring the data in from their suppliers so that across a very large organization, say tens of thousands of employees, maybe hundreds of thousands of employees, they can guide their employees to making the right purchases from the right suppliers at the right prices, et cetera.
So, of course, companies have been buying things from their suppliers for a long, long time. That existed already. But businesses usually are started because there's a problem someone sees that can be solved. What's the problem or the inefficiency you saw that you created this company to deal with?
Well, so there's an estimate. It's hard to know the exact numbers, but there's an estimate that for the Fortune 1000 last year, these companies overspent by $38 billion. Because they have contracts with existing suppliers. So there's this concept of a preferred supplier. It's not always about price. It might be about product quality or service levels, but oftentimes there's a heavy discount that comes with the volumes that these large companies are purchasing. And in a large organization, if you have employees, even though you have a contract with supplier A, if they're off buying items from supplier B or supplier C, maybe it's the same item, but now they're paying retail price instead of the negotiated price. So it's like if Channel
12 had a deal to buy paper from some supplier, but I went off to Staples and bought it on my company
card. That's exactly it. And office supplies is a great example because we all understand it and we can all relate to it, right? But when you get into more industrial products, things where it may not only be about price, it could be about quality, right? And it could be about a certain service level. It could be about the certification of certain products that are going in. If you think
so I go off and buy my Tomahawk missile on my company card.
Well, that would be a hard thing to do on a credit card, but yes, it's that concept, right? So that's really what we've helped people with. My background, I spent the first 10 years of my career at GE. My last role there, I was running the procure-to-pay program for GE Capital, and I saw this frequently. We were very, very good at knowing what we needed to buy We were great at identifying suppliers that we could buy it from, maybe a pool of 5 to 10 that we would evaluate. We'd ultimately come down to a choice of 1 or 2 preferred suppliers. And then we then had to take that and push that out across a company of maybe 100,000 employees in 26 different countries, where we had to say, if you need to buy this particular item, here's where we buy it from. And communicating that and really guiding those employees to the right purchase, the right supplier, the right product across a large organization is very challenging.
It's almost frankly surprising to hear that this wasn't in place already, right? That, you know, what do you attribute that to?
That actually has been a huge learning experience for us. Clearly, the consumer-oriented industries have figured this out a long time ago. We've all been buying things online for well over a decade. Some of the very large organizations, so we talked about office supplies before, if you think of a Staples or somebody like that, they've been very, very good at this. It's shocking to us how quickly you come down in terms of the size of suppliers, where there just hasn't been a huge investment into this. So there's really a large segment of suppliers that have not gotten into this. We started this by really looking at the large companies and thinking of the buying organizations here as our customers. What we've found as we've gone through it is a lot of suppliers are not prepared for this. And even when you get into smaller and smaller, like under 100 million, under $50 million in revenue, a lot of companies are really not prepared for this. So we've actually started opening the offering to smaller suppliers to help them create their product catalogs. And now, instead of publishing them into procurement systems, we may just as easily push them into like a supplier discovery tool, or depending on the product, we may push it into an Amazon or an eBay or a Google Shopping or something like that. So we've really been able to open up the offering from just the large corporations and corporate-like entities, maybe hospitals or universities and such, into actually working with their suppliers as well.
How important was those investments from the Slater Fund to help you get off the ground? How did that play a role?
It was critical, and frankly, the Slater Fund is probably the biggest reason why we're here in Rhode Island. I live in Rhode Island. I've been here for years. My wife grew up here, but I spent 10 years commuting up to Boston to be part of the technology environment there. The Slater Fund was a huge help in terms of helping us go forward. And they've really given us a great edge in terms of our ability to compete and move forward as well.
So how are you going to define success with the company? You know, when you see, you know, how many people do you get to ramp up to, or, you know, is it getting chosen by different big firms that they're going to use your solution? Sort of, how do you define success?
Right. Well, so there's a number of metrics. I mean, certainly the number of customers you have, you know, maybe the number of products that you're pushing through, the number of searches that we have. We actually manage that search engine and that component. So there's a lot of different metrics that we look at. Ultimately, for me, I think it's really about the return on investment that our customers are getting from us, right? So there's this concept of maverick spend or contract leakage. I tend to use them interchangeably, but it's if I'm a purchasing person at one of these large companies, if I'm not purchasing from my preferred suppliers, then that's considered maverick spend. So we try to help them reduce that. And again, it's about guiding. It's not so much restricting the employees, but it's guiding them to the right purchases and getting them.
Unless you have
right
a good
there.
reason to buy that other paper or whatever.
There certainly are, right. There will be exceptions from time to time, but it's really about the ROI that we can start bringing to people. And it's also about understanding the value that they're getting from being able to leverage those contracts that they've negotiated already.
All right, that's all the time we have this week.
Okay.
Kevin, thank you for being here. I appreciate it. And I thank all of you for watching Executive Suite. If you missed the first half of the show, Nick Garrison from Foolproof Brewing was our guest. You can find the full episode and every other episode of Executive Suite on WPRI.com. If you're watching this on the 4th of July, I hope you're having a very happy holiday. And if it's after the 4th, I hope you had a very happy holiday. And we'll see you back here next week on Executive Suite.